Hello comrades! I want to start this video by reminding you that we are comrades, and that if you disagree with the things that I am saying, please respectfully engage with me as a comrade, and I will do the same for you, because this is how we move forward as a social movement. All of that being said, I have some very mixed feelings about the way that we use the concept of cultural appropriation today. So I was really behind this movement when it got started, when we were talking about kind of corporate powers within the music industry stealing and repackaging black culture and black movements with white artists in order to make huge profits. And I think that that's frankly disgusting and should be called out. As an art student, though, I also know that on an individual level, artists steal from artists all the time. And when we're acting in good faith as artists, we're doing that to help expose new people to these ideas, but also to reimagine them and possibly make them better or refine them through our own personal lens. And I think that in the context of cultural appropriation, this can be done very poorly, in a very disrespectful way that doesn't do due diligence and really take into account the culture that you're representing. But I think that this is something that we need to have a bit of nuance about when we discuss it. But where I completely leave this train of thought is with the idea that an individual expressing themselves can be wrong just on the basis of their skin color or cultural heritage and say, no, you can't do that. Let's take, for example, a white girl, very white, like Irish white, like any amount of light causes sunburn white. She gets a tattoo of a wolf and she makes the horrible mistake of posting it on Facebook and saying, I got this because this is my spirit animal. And I think we all know what can happen in left-wing and even leftist spaces with this type of content. To bring my personal viewpoint into this, I am 1/16 Native American. And honestly, that gives me no claim to anything other than being able to say that I am more Native American than Elizabeth Warren. And that is utterly meaningless. I didn't have exposure to Native American culture within my family because even my grandfather, who was a fourth Native American, may he rest in peace, culturally assimilated into American and white culture. But my aunt, who is an eighth Native American, did respectfully look into cultural customs and tried to incorporate them into her life in some meaningful way. And when I was in my teens, she exposed me and encouraged me to look at the idea of having an animal totem. And I chose the wolf. Because the idea of an animal totem, as it was explained to me, and different tribes may look at this in different ways, but the way that it was explained to me from my aunt was that you choose an animal that you kind of admire its traits and want to become, or want to be able to use some of its traits to benefit yourself. And I have a bit of a confession. It's me. I am that white girl. That's my tattoo. And even though I don't have some arbitrary amount of Native Americanness in me to perhaps properly represent that idea in the way that I should be able to, it has been very meaningful for me. It was the idea of taking that courage from this archetype of the wolf that encouraged me to come out in high school, going to a school that, I shit you not, had a tractor day. It was very intense to be the only representative of that community and to be loud and proud and out and to actively encourage other people to more live who they are and come out of the closet themselves. And it had a really positive effect on a lot of people, and I never would have been able to do that if I hadn't, in my teen years, tried to take on the courage of the wolf. And I don't think that I would be here sitting in front of a camera today talking about leftist stuff on YouTube if it weren't for that same courage that I developed then. Because if I wanted to build a big YouTube channel, it would be so much easier for me to build it in anything but a leftist space. But because I believe in our movement, That is why I have the courage to speak up and say things that might not be entirely popular. And I never would have had that without a certain level of what is being called cultural appropriation. I think that cultural ideas should have a certain amount of a fair use policy. As long as you give them fair credit and don't portray them in an incredibly poor way, absolutely use them to enrich your lives. Maybe instead of finding any reason to call someone else out who might be a comrade, why don't we start instead elevating the things that they say that we do like? And if there are things that they say that we don't like, let's try to drown those things out by talking about the parts of their ideas that we actively enjoy. So that instead of spreading negativity, we spread a bit of positivity and are able to come together a little bit better as comrades. I didn't just want this video to represent my opinion on the topic, so I reached out to a fellow left-tuber who has a better understanding of the theory behind cultural appropriation. Here's what he has to say on the topic.
Hey gang, it's Swole here, and we're going to talk about cultural appropriation. So let's say you are an indigenous North American. White people stole your land, killed your people, and bulldozed over your entire way of life. So I totally get the concern when white people appropriate cultural artifacts like the spirit animal. But to my mind, we ought to make the important distinction between the natural mixing of culture and language between peoples and the exploitation and dominance of one group over another. There are innumerable ways in which colonial settlers have already exploited indigenous peoples for profit, many of which continue to this day. So let's examine some of these in more detail by going through some of the concepts put forth by Pierre Bourdieu. So according to Bourdieu, there are three types of capital. And thus in our context, that means there are three ways to exploit a people. First up is economic capital. This would be the form of capital described by Marx, relating to economic resources such as property, money, or assets. We already took all their land, so that takes care of that. Social capital refers to access and belonging to powerful social networks, which give advantages to the life of a person, aka who you know. So white people or businesses with close relationships to indigenous groups can use the social capital for profit. Other examples of social exploitation would be lying about one's native background for legitimacy, hippies adopting native identities or claiming to be cultural ambassadors to indigenous groups for white people. And finally, cultural capital. They are the characteristics of a person that give him an advantage when acquiring an advantageous position in society, aka what you know. Native headdresses, dream catchers, sports team names and mascots, white shamanism are all examples of the exploitative type of cultural appropriation. But it goes far beyond these obvious modern examples. From day one in the New World, we've been appropriating their knowledge. What berries to eat, how to hunt the animals, where to plant the corn, how to survive the winter, all of which are still in play today. Again, the key distinction is that for it to be a negative or exploitative form of appropriation, we have to be taking some form of capital from them and then profiting from it without permission. So if some aloof white person blurts out, X is my spirit animal, take a hard look at the context. Are they using it to gain attention, gain some advantage, promote a brand? Is it mocking or objectifying? Or are they just using it descriptively or appreciatively just because they like the term? So these are the questions we can all be asking whenever we encounter a potential cultural overstep. Back to you, Jackie.
Thanks, Swoletariat. And since I understand that this can be a bit of a touchy and controversial topic, if you want to have a discussion about it, please do so thoughtfully and respectfully in the comment section. Thank you. See you next time.
Or better yet, ignore what I have to say because I am just a white guy and go find some indigenous Native American sources that'll be able to give you a better idea.
Alright, you know what to do by now. It's YouTube. Leave a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and check out the links in the description.